This actually happened to me, a real story about how a betrayal changed the course of my life forever. The email landed in my inbox like a viper. Its subject line a casual meeting update, but the attachment inside, a single blurry photo punched the air from my lungs. It was a picture of my best friend Sarah in a champagne toast with Richard Sterling, my boss, his arm draped possessively around her, both of them beaming in a way that spoke volumes about a celebration I was clearly not a part of. We were all supposed to be at the annual company gala that night, a mandatory attendance for my team, but I had been conveniently forgotten from the invite list, a detail I now understood was no accident. The betrayal wasn't just the photo or the secret rendezvous, but the gut-wrenching realization that this was happening the very week I was up for the promotion Richard had promised me, the one Sarah had encouraged me to pursue with such fervent enthusiasm. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. My world, once a neatly organized spreadsheet of aspirations and friendships, suddenly dissolved into a chaotic mess of question marks and burning anger. Sarah and I had been inseparable since freshman year at NYU, navigating the concrete jungle and corporate ladders together. We shared everything: ramen noodle dinners, whispered secrets about crushes, and even the tiny, cramped apartment in Astoria that barely fit our dreams. When I landed the junior marketing manager position at Sterling & Company, a prestigious advertising firm in Manhattan, she was my biggest cheerleader. A few months later, I even helped her get an entry-level creative role there, believing we could conquer the corporate world side by side. Richard Sterling, our boss, was the charismatic, silver-haired CEO, a man who exuded an aura of effortless power and charm. He had taken me under his wing, or so I thought, mentoring me, giving me prime projects, and consistently hinting at a future leadership role. The promotion to senior marketing director felt not just earned, but destined. Sarah knew how much it meant to me, how many late nights I'd poured into pitches, how I'd sacrificed weekends to perfect campaigns that directly contributed to Sterling & Co.'s recent surge in client acquisitions. She was privy to every detail, every anxiety, every hopeful whisper about my career trajectory. The photograph, seemingly innocuous to an outsider, was a dagger twisted deep. It wasn't just a simple romantic entanglement. It was a calculated move in a game I hadn't even known I was playing. My mind raced back through the preceding weeks, replaying conversations, gestures, and silences. Sarah's sudden, vague excuses for canceling our usual Friday night wine and gossip sessions. Her odd enthusiasm for my extra focus on the upcoming presentation, which now seemed like a clever way to keep me occupied while she made her move. Richard's increasingly distracted demeanor during our one-on-one meetings, his eyes drifting, a subtle smirk playing on his lips when I spoke about my ambitions. I'd attributed it to the usual stresses of a high-stakes firm, never once suspecting the insidious truth brewing beneath the surface. The gala, the one I wasn't invited to, was supposedly a small, intimate gathering for senior leadership and key partners. It was a stepping stone, a networking goldmine. To be excluded was not just an oversight. It was a deliberate snub, a clear signal that I was no longer in the inner circle, if I ever truly was. The email sender was anonymous, an address I didn't recognize, and there was no message, just the attached image. It was a ghost in the machine, a silent messenger of doom. Who sent it, and why? Was it a warning? A cruel joke? Or a sympathetic hand reaching out from the shadows? The questions swirled, but the core truth remained. Sarah, my best friend, and Richard, my mentor, had orchestrated something behind my back, something that threatened to unravel everything I had worked for. My stomach churned with a toxic mix of hurt and fury. I reread the email's subject line, meeting update, and a cold dread seeped into my bones. What meeting? What update? And what else was I missing? The silence of my apartment pressed in around me, amplifying the frantic beat of my heart. I clutched my phone, the screen still displaying the damning photo, and felt a single hot tear trace a path down my cheek. This wasn't just about a promotion anymore. This was about a betrayal so profound it threatened to redefine my entire understanding of loyalty and trust. And I knew, with an icy certainty, that I wouldn't let it stand. The game had just begun, and though I was blindsided, I was far from defeated. The pieces were starting to align, and I was about to become a player they never saw coming. The next morning, I arrived at Sterling & Co. an hour earlier than usual, a cold mask of professionalism firmly in place. My mind was a whirlwind, but my expression was neutral, my movements precise. I needed information, and I needed it without arousing suspicion. The office, usually a hive of activity by 8 a.m., was eerily quiet. I headed straight to my desk, my eyes scanning the familiar rows of cubicles and glass-walled offices. Richard's office door was ajar, a sliver of light escaping from within. Sarah's desk, usually adorned with quirky post-it notes and a collection of succulents, was bare. A small, almost imperceptible tremor ran through me. Had they already left for a meeting update? Or were they still together? I pushed the thought away, focusing on the task at hand. My first stop was the company's internal server, specifically the shared drive where all departmental communications were archived. My role gave me a decent level of access, enough, I hoped, to find something. I started with a simple keyword search: gala, promotion, senior director. The results were overwhelming, a deluge of corporate speak and project updates. But then a subtle anomaly caught my eye: an email chain initiated by Richard, discussing revised attendance protocols for the annual gala. The recipient list was extensive, but my name was conspicuously absent. It was a digital erasure, a deliberate act of exclusion. This confirmed my suspicion. I wasn't forgotten. I was deliberately left out. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a growing sense of urgency propelling me forward. I broadened my search, including names: Sarah, Richard Sterling. The results narrowed, showing mostly professional exchanges. But then a different pattern emerged. A series of emails between Richard and Sarah starting about 2 months prior, initially discussing a new client pitch. Harmless enough at first glance, but the tone subtly shifted. What began as professional correspondence evolved into something more intimate, more clandestine. They started using coded language, referring to off-site brainstorming sessions that were never on the official calendar, and late-night strategy calls that had no corresponding project codes. One email, dated 3 weeks ago, stood out like a sore thumb. From Richard to Sarah, subject: Our Little Secret. The body read: Sarah, I can't stop thinking about our conversation last night. The passion, the ambition, it's intoxicating. You truly are exceptional. Let's discuss your future with Sterling & Co. was over dinner tonight. My treat. No official paper trail needed. Attached was a reservation confirmation for a notoriously exclusive, dimly lit Italian restaurant downtown, the kind where power deals and illicit affairs were often consummated. My breath hitched. This wasn't just a fling. This was a calculated play. Richard was dangling a carrot, a career advancement, in front of Sarah, using her ambition as leverage. And Sarah, my best friend, was clearly biting. Another email, sent just yesterday, the same day as the damning photograph, from Sarah to Richard. Subject: Our Little Secret. The message was brief, almost gloating. Dinner was incredible, Richard. And the update was even better. Thank you for everything. I know I won't disappoint you. This is just the beginning. Attached was a scanned document, a signed offer letter for the senior marketing director position. My promotion, my position, my future. The blood drained from my face, leaving a cold, hollow ache in my chest. It was all there, laid bare in black and white, a digital archive of their treachery. The timing, the secrecy, the blatant disregard for my dedication and loyalty. Sarah hadn't just slept with my boss. She had slept with him to steal my promotion, to usurp my career trajectory, to dismantle my dreams, all while smiling in my face and offering me feigned encouragement. The anonymous email with the photo now made chilling sense. Someone knew, someone was watching, and they wanted me to know. But who? And why were they helping me? I carefully downloaded all relevant emails, creating encrypted copies on a flash drive I kept hidden in my purse. My hands trembled slightly as I worked, a cold fury settling deep within me. This wasn't just betrayal, it was sabotage. And the smug, untouchable Richard Sterling, with his perfectly coiffed hair and predatory charm, along with the seemingly innocent Sarah, were about to learn that I wasn't a pawn in their game. I was the game master, and I was just getting started. The pieces were now fully in place. The humiliation, the discovery, the sickening realization of their intertwined deceit. My vulnerability was dissolving, replaced by a steely resolve. The silence of the office now felt less eerie and more like a canvas for my unfolding plan. My revenge would be meticulous, digital, and devastating. They thought they had won. They were terribly, terribly mistaken. The first step was Complete. Now for the intricate dance of exposure. I closed the laptop, my gaze hardening. Richard Sterling and Sarah Price were about to pay the ultimate price for their ambition and their betrayal. Richard Sterling, in his custom-tailored Italian suits and his corner office overlooking Central Park, exuded an air of invincibility. He was Sterling & Co., the visionary who had built the firm from a boutique agency into a national powerhouse. His connections ran deep, his reputation impeccable, or so it seemed. He moved through the office with a casual confidence, a subtle nod here, a brief, charming smile there, all designed to make everyone feel seen, valued, and ultimately dependent. He was a master manipulator, weaving a web of charm and ambition that snared unsuspecting talent, particularly young, ambitious women. He had a way of making you feel like you were his protégé, his special project, the one destined for greatness under his tutelage. It was a classic tactic, a predatory grooming ritual that I, in my naive ambition, had fallen for hook, line, and sinker. Sarah, now ensconced in the senior marketing director role, seemed to revel in her newfound power. Her desk, once an extension of our shared history, was now conspicuously relocated to a more prominent section, closer to Richard's office. Her wardrobe had upgraded overnight. Designer bags, sharper suits, a distinct air of superiority that she couldn't quite mask. She moved with a newly acquired swagger, her laughter a little too loud in the break room, her pronouncements during meetings a little too definitive. The casual, empathetic Sarah I knew was gone, replaced by a ruthless corporate climber, her eyes gleaming with a hunger I'd never seen. They were a formidable duo, seemingly untouchable. Richard, with his institutional power and vast network, and Sarah, with her fresh ambition and willingness to do whatever it took. They had leveraged their illicit affair into a professional advantage, cementing their positions while trampling over my career and our friendship. I watched them interact from a distance, observing the subtle glances, the knowing smiles, the hushed conversations by the water cooler. Every interaction was a confirmation of their secret, a fresh sting of humiliation. The entire office, it seemed, was buzzing with whispers, though no one dared to speak openly. Richard's influence was too pervasive, his grip too strong. I felt like an outsider, a ghost haunting the halls of my own professional life. The projects I had been so passionate about now felt tainted, my contributions diminished. I was still a marketing manager, but the upward mobility I had anticipated had been abruptly halted, my path diverted by their deceit. My colleagues, sensing the shift in dynamics, treated me with a cautious politeness, a subtle distancing. They knew something was amiss, but fear kept them silent. This isolation, however, wasn't a weakness. It was a crucible. It forged a new resolve within me, a hardened edge that replaced my earlier vulnerability. The initial shock and hurt slowly transformed into a cold, calculated anger. I realized I couldn't simply walk away. To do so would be to let them win, to allow their treachery to go unpunished. I would become another casualty in Richard Sterling's long line of ambitious young women, another stepping stone for Sarah's ascent. That was unacceptable. I couldn't let that happen. The desire for justice, for a leveling of the playing field, became an unyielding fire in my belly. I replayed the emails, the photograph, the quiet betrayals, over and over in my mind, each detail fueling my determination. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to dismantle their carefully constructed empire of lies. My revenge wouldn't be loud or dramatic, at least not at first. It would be a slow burn, a strategic dismantling, piece by piece, until their carefully crafted facades crumbled. I spent my evenings poring over legal precedents, company policies, and digital forensics. I consulted with an old friend from law school, vaguely hinting at a friend's dilemma involving workplace impropriety, gauging the legal ramifications of what I had. He advised me on discretion, on the importance of irrefutable evidence, and on the legal tightrope I would be walking. The more I learned, the clearer my path became. Richard's power wasn't absolute. It was built on a foundation of meticulously maintained appearances and a careful suppression of dissent. Sarah's ambition, while a weapon against me, could also be her undoing. Her eagerness to please, her desperation to hold on to her ill-gotten gains, made her predictable. I started mapping out a strategy, a multi-pronged attack that would target both Richard's reputation and Sarah's career. The digital breadcrumbs I had found were just the beginning. I needed more. I needed to paint a comprehensive picture, not just of a sordid affair, but of corporate malfeasance, abuse of power, and a systematic pattern of unethical behavior. My resolve wasn't just about personal vendetta. It was about ensuring that no one else fell victim to their manipulations. This was no longer just about me. It was about protecting future ambitious women from a similar fate. The thought solidified my purpose, transforming my personal pain into a righteous quest. I looked at the shimmering cityscape outside my apartment window, the lights of Manhattan a distant, glittering tapestry. Out there, in one of those illuminated towers, two people believed they had won. They believed they were safe, secure, above reproach. But they hadn't accounted for the quiet, meticulous anger of a woman scorned, a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain back. The war was coming, and I was ready to lead the charge. My initial vulnerability had been shed like old skin, revealing a core of steel. They were about to discover the true cost of their little secret. My campaign of exposure began subtly, a series of almost imperceptible shifts designed to create unease and distrust within Richard and Sarah's carefully constructed world. I started by strategically forgetting small, crucial details in team meetings that Sarah was now leading. Not enough to cause immediate damage, but just enough to make her look slightly unprepared, to sow tiny seeds of doubt in the minds of her new direct reports. For instance, I'd mention a historical client preference or a specific data point that Sarah, despite her senior director title, should have known, but clearly didn't. When she fumbled, I'd offer the information with a polite, almost apologetic smile, making her look less competent without ever directly challenging her authority. It was a slow drip, a quiet erosion of her credibility. Simultaneously, I began to leverage the anonymous email. I created a burner email account, carefully cloaked by a VPN, and crafted a series of cryptic, anonymous tips to a few key individuals within Sterling & Co.'s HR department. I didn't send the damning photos or emails directly, not yet. Instead, I hinted at irregularities in the recent promotion process for senior marketing director and unethical conduct involving senior leadership. The emails were vague enough to avoid direct accusation, but specific enough to pique curiosity and trigger internal investigations. I knew HR departments moved slowly, bogged down by bureaucracy and the fear of legal repercussions. But I also knew that even a hint of impropriety, especially when it involved a CEO, could set wheels in motion. My next move was to subtly undermine Richard's authority, using his own words against him. I began citing his past advice, often slightly out of context, during meetings where he was trying to push a new, contradictory agenda. As Richard always taught us, I'd begin, the key to client retention is consistency in messaging across all platforms. Deviating from that, as we're proposing now, could potentially jeopardize our Q3 metrics. It forced him to either acknowledge his previous stance, thereby admitting a contradiction, or to overtly dismiss his own established wisdom, making him appear inconsistent. The effect was minimal at first, but cumulatively, it chipped away at the image of his infallible leadership. My biggest weapon, however, remained the digital evidence. I knew I couldn't just blast the emails to the entire company. That would be messy, unprofessional, and could easily backfire, painting me as a disgruntled employee seeking petty revenge. I needed a more surgical strike. I needed to ensure that the information landed in the right hands, at the right time, with maximum impact. I focused my attention on Emily Vance, the chief financial officer. Emily was a no-nonsense, highly respected veteran of Sterling & Co. She was known for her integrity, her sharp mind, and her utter intolerance for anything that jeopardized the company's bottom line or its ethical standing. She also had a long-standing quiet rivalry with Richard, often disagreeing with his more flamboyant, riskier proposals. Emily was my target. I waited for the perfect moment. It came during the quarterly earnings report meeting, a high-pressure event where all departmental heads presented their figures. Richard was as usual in his element, regaling the board with his vision for the next quarter. Sarah, nervous but trying to appear confident, presented her department's projections, which, thanks to my subtle manipulations, included a few minor, easily overlooked discrepancies. During a break, I accidentally bumped into Emily by the coffee station. "Rough quarter, huh?" I said, feigning a casual air. Sarah's projections seemed a bit optimistic, considering our current client attrition rates. Emily raised an eyebrow, a flicker of interest in her shrewd eyes. "Optimistic is one word for it," she grumbled. "We can't afford any more surprises. This company is built on transparency, not smoke and mirrors." I nodded, then lowered my voice conspiratorially. "I worry about Richard's judgment lately. He's been distracted. And some of his decisions, like the quick promotion of Sarah, feel less about merit and more about other factors. I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Emily's gaze sharpened. "What other factors are you referring to?" she asked, her voice low. This was it. The moment of truth. "I've seen some things, Emily," I confessed, keeping my tone serious and concerned, not accusatory. "Emails, internal communications. They suggest a significant conflict of interest, an abuse of power, and a very disturbing relationship between Richard and Sarah that directly impacted my promotion. I have proof, irrefutable proof, if you're willing to see it." Emily stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she took a slow sip of her coffee. "Meet me in my office after the board meeting," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Bring everything. And don't breathe a word of this to anyone." A surge of triumph coursed through me, quickly followed by a wave of anxiety. This was the point of no return. I was laying all my cards on the table, staking my career and potentially my reputation on Emily Vance's integrity. But I knew it was the right move. The fear of staying silent, of letting them continue their charade, was far greater than the fear of acting. The escalation had begun. The war was officially underway. I spent the rest of the board meeting a whirlwind of internal anticipation, barely registering the droning presentations. My gaze occasionally drifted to Richard, then to Sarah. They sat there, smug and confident, utterly oblivious to the storm I was about to unleash. Their downfall wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was an imminent reality, and I, the humiliated and betrayed, was holding the fuse. The chilling resolution was closer than they could ever imagine. My hands were steady as I gripped the flash drive in my pocket. The battle was about to be won, not with a bang, but with a quiet, digital whisper that would shatter their world. The meeting with Emily Vance in her office felt like stepping into a cold, sterile operating room. The blinds were drawn, the air was thick with unspoken tension, and her expression was grim. I sat opposite her large, polished mahogany desk, the small flash drive a weight in my hand. "All right," she said, her voice clipped. "Show me what you have." Without a word, I plugged the drive into her secure workstation. I navigated through the encrypted folders, opening each damning email and the single, blurry photograph one by one. The timeline I had meticulously compiled, detailing every interaction, every suspicious meeting, every coded message, appeared on her screen. I explained the context, the implications, the direct impact on my promised promotion and my subsequent exclusion from the gala. I highlighted the casual arrogance in Richard's messages, the eager complicity in Sarah's replies. I showed her the signed offer letter for my position, now Sarah's, dated the day after the clandestine dinner. Emily listened in silence, her eyes fixed on the screen, her jaw tightening with each piece of evidence. I could see the wheels turning in her sharp financial mind, calculating not just the ethical violations, but the potential legal and reputational damage to Sterling and Coars. Her professional composure was absolute, yet I could sense a simmering outrage beneath the surface. When I finished, the silence in the room stretched, heavy and suffocating. She leaned back in her chair, her gaze unwavering. "This," she said, her voice low and measured, "is far worse than I imagined. Richard Sterling has been with this company for over 20 years, she continued, almost to herself. He built it piece by piece, but this is a fundamental breach of trust, a complete disregard for corporate ethics, and a potential lawsuit waiting to happen if this gets out." "And Sarah?" I asked, needing to hear her judgment on my former best friend. Emily scoffed. "An opportunistic climber. A pawn in his game, yes, but a willing one. She knew exactly what she was doing. She sacrificed loyalty and integrity for a title she didn't earn." A wave of vindication washed over me. Emily saw it, understood it, felt the outrage. My painstaking work, my months of quiet observation and meticulous documentation had paid off. "What happens now?" I finally asked. "Now," Emily said, her eyes glinting with a steely resolve, "we secure the company's future. And we ensure justice is served both for you and for Sterling & Co.'s integrity." She outlined her plan. She would convene an emergency meeting of the board of directors, presenting my evidence under strict confidentiality. The company's legal team would be brought in immediately. Richard would be placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full internal investigation. Sarah's promotion would be frozen, and she would also be subject to an inquiry. "This won't be easy," Emily warned. "Richard has friends on the board. He'll fight. But this evidence, it's overwhelming. And the financial implications of allowing this behavior to continue are too great for them to ignore." I felt a strange mix of relief and nervous anticipation. The revenge payoff was within reach, but the battle wasn't over yet. Richard Sterling wouldn't go down without a fight. The next few days were a blur of hushed conversations, closed-door meetings, and a palpable tension that hung heavy in the air at Sterling and Comber. Richard and Sarah were still coming into the office, their smiles a little too wide, their interactions a little too performative. They clearly sensed something was amiss, but they hadn't yet grasped the magnitude of the impending earthquake. I, meanwhile, kept my head down, maintaining my professional demeanor, observing from a distance as the HR and legal teams subtly started their quiet incursions. Then, one Tuesday morning, the hammer dropped. Richard Sterling was called into an emergency board meeting. He emerged an hour later, his face pale, his usual swagger replaced by a stunned, hollow expression. Within minutes, a company-wide email was disseminated. Effective immediately, Richard Sterling has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation into matters of corporate conduct. A collective gasp rippled through the office. Whispers erupted, hushed and excited. No one knew the details, but everyone understood the seismic shift. Richard, the seemingly untouchable CEO, was out. Emily Vance was named interim CEO. Next, Sarah was called into HR. She returned an hour later, her eyes red-rimmed, her face blotchy. Her senior marketing director title was stripped, and she was demoted back to her previous entry-level creative role, with a stern warning about her future conduct. The offer letter, which had been her triumph, was rescinded. The office became a spectacle of quiet drama. Richard's personal effects were packed by an HR representative, his office meticulously cleared. Sarah, now relegated to her old cubicle, avoided eye contact, shrinking into herself, the once bright spark of ambition in her eyes extinguished. The revenge payoff was immense. Richard's reputation, once pristine, was now in tatters. His fall from grace was swift and public, a stark warning to anyone who dared to abuse their power. Sarah, stripped of her ill-gotten gains, was publicly humiliated, her career ambitions derailed by her own moral bankruptcy. The smugness, the arrogance, the sense of invincibility, it had all crumbled. But the true victory wasn't just in their downfall. It was in the restoration of a semblance of justice, in the reaffirmation that integrity, even in the cutthroat corporate world, could still prevail. A few weeks later, Emily Vance called me into her office. She offered me the senior marketing director position, the one I had earned, the one that had been stolen. "You demonstrated remarkable resilience and integrity," she said, her expression serious. "You put the company's well-being above your own immediate comfort, and you delivered undeniable proof of serious misconduct. We need leaders like you, people who aren't afraid to do the right thing, even when it's difficult." I accepted, a quiet sense of triumph blossoming in my chest. It wasn't just a job. It was a reclaiming of my future, a testament to my perseverance. My initial vulnerability had given way to unyielding resolve, and that resolve had paid off. As I settled into my new office, the corner space that once belonged to Sarah's short-lived reign, I looked out at the familiar skyline of Manhattan. The lights still twinkled, but now they seemed to reflect a different story, a story of resilience, justice, and the quiet power of a woman who refused to be silenced. The chilling resolution lingered in the air, a silent whisper in the polished halls of Sterling & Co. I had won. But the scars of betrayal, though faded, would forever remind me of the true cost of trust and the intoxicating, dangerous allure of ambition. The end.